Greetings, GameCola faithful, and welcome to the GameCola podcast. This is podcast number 169. Nice. And I'm your host and podcast commander, Joseph Martin, joined by...
I'm Speedy Blue.
I'm Quick as Lightning James.
I'm Jumpin' John.
And together we're the Speed Rangers.
This podcast is a fast one. We're pulling a fast one on you. Thank you, Blue, for the good joke that I have stolen for the podcast title and theme. We're recording this the Sunday before the podcast goes out, so we don't have a lot of time. I have to edit this out in less than 24 hours. Or no, about 24 hours. It'll be less when we're done. That's math for you. So we each get, this is the rule, we each get 15 minutes. Mine includes this bit here, so I'm just going to get started now with my topics, which are two games that I've been playing in recent times. The first one you've probably heard and expected, Mega Man Battle Network. I finished 1, 2, and 3 at this point, and I've enjoyed them. They have not yet blown me away. I have not had a moment like I've had with, like, for example, Mega Man 03, where I was like, ah, yes, this is, like, they nailed it. They took all of the good elements and they, like, nailed it. There's still 3 more games, 4, 5, and 6. But I've also heard that some people say that they like 3 the best. And if this is the high point, then I'm not sure. I guess I've heard that, like, 3 is the best narratively and 6 is the best mechanically, like... They do improve and make more interesting mechanics as time goes on. Some of you guys have played. James, you've played some Battle Network, right?
I haven't played it, but I've seen, like, complete, like... I used to watch walkthroughs of the game years and years ago, and I still rewatch them occasionally. So I know the games relatively well, at least 1 through 3 anyway.
Yeah, so, like, and so, okay, then we're in this similar range of experience. What I would say is that there's sort of 2 main domains that the game exists in. One is the RPG, kind of RPG, though a very unique take on this action RPG angle, where you've got this grid virus battle or net battle, where they're like the boss battles. You've got 9 squares. Your opponent has 9 squares. You move around those 9 squares in real time. And you have a certain, basically, they're called chips, but you can think of them as, like, you get 5 random moves from a set of 30 that you pick ahead of time. And you have to, your goal is to defeat the enemy with as fast as you can without taking damage. Obviously, you don't want to die, but also the faster you do it and the less damage you take, the better your reward at the end of the battle is. So either you'll get money, which you can spend on upgrades or other chips moves, or you'll get chips themselves. Kind of like Paper Mario Sticker Star, but good.
So not Paper Mario Sticker Star.
Yeah. But like similar idea of like really breaking down like the idea of an RPG battle and creating something new out of it that isn't necessarily based entirely on experience points, right? It's based on getting, having you do tougher battles, and through those tougher battles you get access to stronger things. Right. And you get this curve. But you also still get, and you get, like, power-ups, like health power-ups. And it's actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it is really similar to a lot of how Sticker Star works. One of the core things, though, is that actually doing the battles is fun.
And it gives you something useful.
Yeah, and you get, the chips are useful. There's
money.
Mechanics.
The money, too, because you buy the upgrades, most of them anyway.
And... there's also a very clearly marked mechanic of if you do get stuff that is useless to you, you can get rid of it for a chance to get something else cool, because they have these chip trader gachapon things in the game where you put 3 or 10 chips in and it gives you a random one back. So, because there are limits, like you can only use, you never need more than 4 of a certain, or 5 depending on the game, of a certain chip, because it limits how many of the same chip you can have. In your folder. So those are easy to say, like, oh, this is extra, but it's not worthless. Whereas I feel like in, like, Sticker Star, you're just getting all these stickers, and most of them were useless. And there was no random element, too, right? Like, that's the other thing. Like, the random element also keeps any one battle from being exactly the same, but you still get into a point where you're like, oh, I can take care of these battles very quickly. But it's not like, oh, I just press A. It's, oh, this chip, I still have to position myself. I still have to, like, think a little bit
And
even if it's easy.
And you're given a random assortment of chips at the start of battle, unlike
Right.
Sticker Star, where my understanding is you can just pick from your entire array of stickers. So, like, there is every battle is different by virtue of you don't know what you're going to get at the start of. And I think a while back I likened the Battle Network games to a card game, when while it turns out that's probably not really the best way to do it, that one aspect where you're sort of dealt a random set of things that you have at the start of the game, I still think is a little reminiscent of like a card game where your hand at the start of each turn is just pulled from like a deck, or in this case, like your pack of I forget what it's called exactly, your deck of chips or something like that.
Yeah, they call it a folder.
Folder, that's right.
Totally
It's all
not
about
cards.
computers.
Cards.
That's the other thing that is so interesting about this game that I'll get to in a little bit. But like the theme of sort of sci-fi future internet at a time where the internet was primarily based on cables.
It's a series of tubes.
It's very interesting, showing like this is a futuristic technological world where the internet is pervasive in every aspect of life.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still very much based on physically connecting to devices.
Like, there's really not any sort of wireless technology. Like, it's very interesting how they, like,
There's a little bit, but it's like at the same thing. Like, I was thinking about, like,
phones.
It really is
there's cell phones, basically. Like, you can receive calls.
Right, and, like, you can get emails. But also there is, like, this is the era of the wireless adapter too, which is like that's the exact level of like wirelessness you get. Like there's one part where you get a key item, which is a device that lets you connect to wirelessly, but you'd still have to physically take this wireless device, put it into the port, and then you could connect to it from like the other side of the room.
Yeah,
which is like
Battle Network.
It's so
2,
funny that this
is
such a futuristic world. Yeah. It's such a futuristic world, and yet like that is still the concept of what wireless technology is. And basically the only advances are that like you can receive emails, I think.
It's the kind of
like,
things you can do with the internet, not the technology used to make the internet almost.
It's so fascinating. But the other side of Battle Network is the overworld stuff, and that they have definitely not figured out how to make interesting or fun. It is so much just like find the NPC, find the random thing to click A on, and that can be especially frustrating when you have these random encounters. And thankfully the random encounters are fun enough that kind of getting lost and continuously running into them as you try to figure out where you're supposed to go is fun enough that like it's like, okay, it's not that big a deal. But it's still frustrating to be like and it's also like some of this might be localization too, but it's not necessarily that any given like task is impossible to figure out, but there's so many of them like this that eventually you're gonna get hit on something that you did not like. Oh, it was some element of a room that you didn't recognize or you didn't happen to hit A on, and so you're not gonna remember. And so then it's just like, oh, I'm gonna walk around the whole world, or I'm just eventually like I look it up on the internet, which to be fair is a thing you could do in 2000 in the early 2000s. And in fact, it's funny when I look up these posts, a lot of the time like the first or second result will be like a forum post from like 2004. So it's actually kind of a similar experience. But yeah, like there was one where it was like one bird among many or something like that, and guess what, it's not the birds at the zoo, the zoo that is a key location that you've been to many times and have had to click on the birds many times. No, it's a random set of what is apparently paper cranes in a hospital room that does not look like that.
Yep.
In the hospital room. And you're supposed to click on that. And it's like, how would you ever figure this out?
Just be glad that you aren't going for the post game, because in the post game there is a particular quest that requires you to know Japanese because they didn't translate one of the puzzles. Like, I don't mean they didn't translate the dialogue, but like you get these 3 items which have these little filled in squares and blank squares, and if you stack them vertically, they spell out a word in katakana, which is one of the writing types of Japanese. But again, this is in katakana, so it requires that you A, know how to read katakana, and B, know what that word means.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, literally, there is no other possible way you can complete that side quest in the post-game unless you just look it up otherwise.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah,
how... Well, whoops.
The localizers are definitely struggling. There's another section of a game where, like, there's these letter tiles, and you have to, like, you get asked a question, you have to step on the correct letter tiles to get through that section, and it is very clear that the original, whatever the original Japanese was, it did not translate enough that you could just translate the puzzles. But then also that means that the localizers just had to come up with their own puzzles, and they're so bad at it. There's no difficulty curve. A lot of them just don't make any sense. Like, there was one where the answer was B, but it was like a B the bug. But then, like, you're just supposed to hit the letter B. Because I'm guessing it was a single, character or kanji in the original. And it was just like, it was so... And then there was one part where, like, you had two passwords, which were just a series of random letters, and you had to, like, alternate them.
Yeah.
Like, use the first one or the first one. And to remember it, I had to start singing the two words in the battle theme whenever I would hit the battle theme. Because that's the other thing. Like, you have so much context changing. It's very easy to get lost because you're walking somewhere, you enter a random battle, you exit the random battle, and you're like, I've completely forgotten
which way was I going?
What I was doing.
Yeah.
Or it's the time. There's another thing at the end of 3, like, there are these things that are, like, moving around, and you have to avoid them or you'll get, like, grabbed and sent back.
Yep.
And if you hit a random battle while you're, like, navigating through these things, you get dropped out of the random battle, and then you just get eaten up.
Yeah.
Because you have to take a second to regain your context.
Yeah.
That section was also terrible because it had, like, these random bits where it's like, oh, you stepped in the wrong place. There was no tell for it. You just stepped in the wrong place, and now you have to go back to the beginning.
Yep.
So the overworld stuff is a bit of a mess.
Yeah, there's also, I mean, again, there's also some side quests and other things. Like, have you seen any of the I call them the peekaboo NPCs, where, like, there's, like, you see, like, one pixel of somebody, or, like, as you walk past, they pop out for just, like, a couple frames and then hide back away, and you have to
I've gotten
notice
a couple
that.
of them.
Yeah, so there's some of those. There's also the quiz masters. If you talk to them, I forget if they're post game only.
I've done some of those too.
And those are
there's some
like,
there's some
wacky.
There's some in the pre, but then the high level ones are in the post game.
Yeah, so those are also equally. It's just like, well, how would I? It's like, what's the number of, like, chairs in this one particular room? Like, it's like, really?
But you can also brute force that, at least, right? Like,
right.
It's a bit of a pain, but you can brute force it in a way that you can't brute force finding... Well, you can brute force finding an NPC, but it's terrible.
Yeah.
Real quick, because I'm running out of my 15 minutes. I have also been playing Pokémon Sleep. It's very interesting.
So you've been sleeping?
Yes, I've been getting as much sleep as I can to get all those Pocket Mans. Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's kind of just making it up a little bit. Like, is it really detecting how well I sleep? Probably not, but and I apparently do not make many interesting sounds while I sleep. I just roll over like every couple of hours, and that's it. So no fun content there.
Would you say this game is also like Paper Mario Sticker Star?
It's also very front heavy in the morning. Like, when you wake up, that's when you have to do most of the stuff in the game. Other than that, it's a kind of game where you can just sort of pull it up and, like, you're feeding Snorlax the berries, so you just click on all the Pokemon and all the berries, and the ingredients for the food goes in, and then you feed Snorlax a breakfast, lunch, and a dinner. So really, you only need to access it, like, maybe 3 or 4 times a day, and for like a couple seconds, or like a minute or two, a couple times a day, which is, like, maybe a little bit more involved than I thought it would be, but also, it's better than scrolling Twitter and Reddit. It's better for my mental health, so it's not that bad. Anyway, I've hit my 15 minutes, so that's all I can say. Who's next?
I'll go next.
Okay, James.
So
you did something very interesting.
I did.
I'm very excited to hear about this.
Yeah, so these previous 2 days before we're recording this podcast, I visited the Vintage Computer Festival West, which was held at the Computer History Museum here in California. I'd never really attended stuff like this before, but it was really, really amazing. I mean, one being held in a computer history museum, although it's not held in the actual museum section. They have an upper floor where it's like exhibit halls and that sort of stuff, which is dedicated for this sort of thing, and they sponsor the event and stuff like that. So I didn't actually visit the museum proper for the most part, but I got to see, the whole event is a bunch of people like giving talks about their various projects or, the interesting things that they've done regarding, the, computer or video game world. And, just people bringing their unique or obscure or interesting vintage computing hardware. There was somebody who had a bunch of old computers hooked up to an electric sewing machine, to like not a sewing machine, a knitting machine, so it would actually knit yarn based on computer commands. That was really cool. So you could basically just plug in an image, and as long as you attach, as long as you spooled up the correct colors of threads, it would just make that image. It was really interesting.
That's really cool.
So then there was somebody with, there was a whole section of vintage, like 80s and 90s Japanese home computers, which was really cool. Somebody had a digital camcorder set plugged into a 1987 Sharp X68000 computer, and you could take selfies and print out photos using their the art software on there, which is actually for its time like really, really advanced, very fancy.
Yeah.
Like it's on par with, like, I mean, I don't use Photoshop or anything that advanced, but I use software called Paint.net, which is like, has a lot of the basic stuff.
And
you can apply filters. Yeah, it's free. And this software basically had all of those features, masking, cropping, outlining, text, text placing, and all sorts of other stuff, as well as the ability to display video, and then capture a screenshot of video being input to the computer, because the computer just had an optional video input card that you could buy for it. And so, of course, there were lots of games. There was an IBM computer that had a Sega Genesis inside, which was...
Inside?
Yes. So, there was a floppy disk drive, and then there's just a Sega Genesis cartridge port and controller plugs. It was... basically all of these computers, I've never seen anything like them before.
That's really cool.
So, people just had... So, they just had a Genesis flash card hooked up to it, and you could play... some people were playing Sonic CD and, a couple other Genesis games. So one was called, Subterranean, which had really cool music, on ostensibly a desktop computer, except it was real Sega Genesis hardware inside. And then there were a whole bunch of, more obscure Japanese home computers, like the PC-98, the MSX computers. I actually played a little Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake on a real MSX2. That was really cool, although it was a lot of trouble getting it running. Like the people, like the exhibitor had to really futz with the computer for a while to get it working, but that was really fun. So, and then just a whole bunch of other stuff. People had now the hardware for setting up what is effectively a dial-up internet service provider. Technology has advanced and gone down in cost so much that now you can just buy all of the hardware you need to set up a dial-up internet service provider. And so somebody had that set up, and you could, you see the different levels of speed from 56K modem to I forget what it was called. It's IDSN or something.
Yeah, I would also think like with the modern internet too, right? You get things we were talking about on the awards live stream about I forgot. Cyber world, cyberpunk.
Yeah,
70,
Cyberpunk 2077.
2077. How it's a huge game, right? And part of that is because computers have gotten so good that there's optimizations that are no longer just completely debilitating, right? You can do it. It's a pain, but you can still do it. But I imagine the internet's kind of like that too, where there's a lot of computer the lower bound of the average person that would be using our website is such that we can...
Yeah, we can't have all of these fancy graphics, or we need to compress them down and crunch them down, because otherwise it'll take 20 minutes to load our web page or something like that.
Yeah.
It took them a while to get it set up, so I didn't actually, unfortunately, get to check out that exhibit, like, practically, like, hands-on. But that was the other really amazing thing, is that, unlike a museum proper, like, where basically all the exhibits are behind, glass or behind a barrier, these were basically all completely hands-on. Like, people they encouraged you to sit down in front of like this array of old Commodore computers and type up a basic program, like run some software on it, and that was really, really cool. There were a couple of Digital Equipment Corporation machines, like PDP-8s, PDP-11s, which were like 60s and 70s microcomputers, or like mini computers, I guess they would be called, because they didn't take up whole rooms. They just took up, a box that was like, 2 to 3 square feet or 2 to 3 cubic feet instead. I mean, some of these boxes, make no mistake, were very large. One of the amazing things is somebody had a time-sharing PDP-8 system, which had a hard drive that was 2.5 megabytes. And it came on this big, giant caddy. The thing is the size of, it's like a 1 foot diameter, like cartridge, like circular cartridge. And this thing is 2.5 megabytes, which admittedly, for the time, which was, I think, early 70s, that's actually a perfectly reasonable amount of storage for that time period. But it's just like, it's loud. I mean, not super loud, but it's like, like you can, this was from the era where you could hear computers working. Like, you could hear them processing. Like, you could hear them.
You can hear my computer working pretty hard right now.
Yeah, that's true. But I don't mean like, I don't just mean fans. I mean, like, you could hear them basically crunching numbers. Yeah. Yeah. So floppy disks were, grinding around, hard drives whirring, and then I played some SimCity 2000 on an IBM 486 machine, which was really great. Really great. I played some Doom. Yeah, and there were a whole bunch of other interesting computers. I played the original Rogue from Epix on a Macintosh SE. So any games where you say, oh, it's a roguelike, this is the original. This is Rogue. So, and it is primitive. It's very, very primitive. It is just a top-down view with a little window in the bottom in the bottom of the screen, which is just text saying, basically, if you walk over an item, what item it is you picked up, or if an enemy attacks you or you attempt to attack an enemy, which, by the way, a large amount of attacking enemies and them attacking you is missing. I think, like, there was probably about a 35 to 40% miss chance. Like, enemies would just constantly miss me. I would constantly miss enemies, and generally I would kill enemies in only 1 to 2 hits. But it was just like, it's like, wow. This is, but the dungeons are all just randomly generated, and you can see sort of a little mini map in another window in the corner of the screen. You've got an inventory, which is just like, you just click and drag. They basically look like desktop icons. Like, it largely uses the Macintosh's own user interface. Like, everything is just system windows with, like, and again, the inventory is literally desktop icons. Like, you can click and drag them around as if it was just a window on your with a directory on your computer. It's really funny. I think some of the old Mac Venture games, like Deja Vu and Shadowgate on Mac, were similar in how they function. But I digress. Didn't
you also play a very early video game?
Yep, I was actually just about to bring that up. I got to play one of the first video games ever made. I think it might be the second, maybe the third. I'm not sure.
Debatable.
It was Spacewar on its original system, the PDP-1, which is again is Digital Equipment Corporation, and we had an entire demo shown off of the thing playing music, which was fascinating because it has no speakers. The way that the person told us, they had the person there who actually wrote the software back in 1962, and the way that he did that was he unplugged some of the light bulbs on the front panel, which would blink to show you basically the status of the computer's processing. He unplugged 4 of the light bulbs on the front for the status registers, which could also be optionally, like, manually written to change their value, and wired up speakers and another, a student at MIT's just stereo amplifier. And then in software would just turn those lights on and off at a certain frequency to make it play music. Like, it is astonishing. And that whole routine, by the way, takes up basically the entire processing power of the computer. Because it's just basically turning value, like turning a light on and off at, like 2,000 times a second.
Yeah. Yeah. But you actually played the game Spacewar, right?
Yes, I did. And on
this is the question.
Thing.
This is the question.
Yes.
Was it a fun video game?
Does it hold up?
Yes. It was a fun video game. It holds up. Because it's a multiplayer game, so there's 2 people. They showed us 2 different versions. The very original version, which is just a sort of little star in the center just for a reference point, and 2 ships flying around. Later, they added a starry background, and they made the star in the center actually have gravity. So if you get too close, it'll like actually start messing with the trajectory of your ships. Your ships will curve around the star. And,
cool.
Basically you have a thrust button, which fires your rocket engine. You have a fire button, which shoots a little missile out from the front of your ship. You can turn the ship left or right, and then you can press hyperspace, which will warp which will make your ship disappear and reappear somewhere else randomly on the screen. However, that feature was added kind of last minute, and so if you do it too much, sometimes you just don't reappear, and the game restarts because it counts you as having died because your ship just doesn't come back. And so the sort of lore explanation they gave was that no one has returned after using hyperspace more than 7 times. So they decided to make the bug a feature. And it was fun. Several other people, this is a packed little demonstration. So I had a blast playing it. It was genuinely really fun. It's just a simple game, but it still holds up, and it's still really fun. And yeah, it was great. I loved this whole trip, and I just, it was better than I could have imagined. Also, one last thing that I'm really proud of that I really enjoyed doing, I was sitting down at a table eating lunch in the sort of exhibit hall, and some of the other people, every random person who was there at the event kind of just sits down at tables and starts eating and chatting. And I got to talk with a man by the name of Leonard Trammell, who is the son of Jack Trammell, the founder of Commodore Computers.
Wow.
And he himself, Leonard, was, I believe, an executive or one of the head honchos at both Commodore and Atari in the 80s and 90s. So it was really cool getting to talk with him and just meet, he was talking with a whole bunch of us sitting around the table and kind of hearing his insights on the computing world and the video game world and everything just over, all of the years, and how, he's, a lot of the sentiments he hears nowadays is stuff that he's heard 2 or 3 times before in the past, having been in the industry so long. It was just really, really cool. Very, very interesting, very, very cool guy to talk to. And I think that's my time.
Nice.
Yep.
But
Good
how
timing.
was the ray tracing?
How was the ray tracing? It was great. They traced lines on that vector display. Actually, it was a vector monitor. So because it was meant for point plotting for statistics work. So Yeah, it was the ray tracing. There sure were some nice glowing lines on that screen.
Perfect. That's what I like to hear.
Blue, how do you want to spend the rest of your 14 minutes? Since you used 1 minute for a joke about ray tracing.
Okay, so lightning round. There was a trailer for a new Invincible game, and people didn't like it because it was a good trailer, and then it was a mobile game. Which at this point, I just kind of expect from every game that doesn't show gameplay. Like,
But Blue, don't you guys have phones?
I do, and I don't think I have any games on it right now. Yeah, not a single game.
Me neither.
People don't buy phones for mobile games. People download mobile games because they just happen to be there, not because they want them.
Yeah.
Basically, if you have your phone and you're in situations where you don't have internet for extended periods of time, or if you have like really you've got like data, you have limited data.
The problem with that is that most mobile games require an internet connection now.
Yeah. So that's also feeding into the issue.
Yeah, it's terrible. I heard from James that if you've been wondering if the Minecraft multiplayer moderation issue has gotten better, it hasn't. You're welcome for that breaking news.
No.
Nicolas Cage is now in Dead by Daylight, and I haven't played him yet, but I'm hearing good things.
Also, isn't the Xenomorph from Alien also coming to Dead by Daylight?
That's on its way, yeah. It just got announced the other day.
That feels like it makes a little more sense than Nicolas Cage. Not that I'm upset that Nicolas Cage is around, but it definitely seems like that. Like, I can see how that sort of came together. I guess maybe because Nicolas Cage was in a vampire movie. Is that really
he's actually, he stars in several horror movies, like Color Out of Space, which is probably the best adaptation of Lovecraft I've seen. And also Mom and Dad was lots of fun.
Oh yeah, that was a fun movie.
I also heard he's just a really big fan of horror, like as a genre and movies.
And also I think his son is really into the game, so...
Yeah, he had a whole speech at like Summer Games Fest about it.
Yeah.
So it's like, it just made sense. Why not?
The one thing I did hear, because my sisters love Dead by Daylight as well, is that they've been saying if you're playing as him, when he's like, I don't know if he's like been hooked or if he's like being grabbed by the killer, he will start begging for his life. And just talking about, he's like, please, I have money, I'm a celebrity, or something really goofy, which apparently he just had a lot of fun doing his lines.
Yeah, I've heard he's one of the more talkative characters in the game, but also he's, like, from the killer's perspective, from being able to hear him, like, walking around and, like, breathing and stuff, he's actually quieter. So in, like, a tier list of more meta characters, he's more up there, I think. Also, I think one of his perks is actually part of the meta game now. So there's that.
Are they gonna ban Nicolas Cage to Ubers?
I don't think... Well, maybe his perk, but I don't think they've ever banned a character.
You know, I was just making that's a very Pokemon way to look at it.
Yeah, it's very... Dead by Daylight competitive is very interesting topic, because, like, years ago, you'd be like, oh, it's not really possible, but we'll try to do an approximation, and so you, like, have a list of banned perks, but now, like, the whole game is trending towards competitive, so it's just really weird. Oh no, I got an email, and that's legally all I can say about that, I think.
You got a email?
Yep.
You can't even say what it's an email about?
I literally cannot. But
Is it something that you will one day be able to tell us?
yes.
So
Okay.
you can tell us now, get it out of the way.
I cannot.
No, definitely not on a podcast that's being recorded. That's probably like very like he's probably A, not supposed to tell us, and B, definitely not supposed to record it.
Yeah.
Nope.
Okay.
All right, good talk, guys.
You're welcome. I forgot that I couldn't talk about it for a minute. Oh, there's a resurrection, I suppose, of the game Marvel Avengers Alliance, which was a Facebook game.
No way. I played an unhealthy amount of that
Oh, you
game
don't know about
back
this
in the
yet?
day.
Oh my goodness.
No.
They just released a new beta. I've done a bit of animation for it, and I've been doing some of the beta testing. We're resurrecting, well, mostly them. I just, help a little bit, and I'm like, here's a bug, I found it. But I did do one animation. It was cool. Or I did a set of animations. I did the Daredevil animations. It was cool. So they're bringing back the entire game as it was, except they're fixing all the gross money grubbing parts, because it's going to be like an offline single player experience. And so instead of waiting for energy or waiting for everything to take real time, you can play more, and every battle reduces timers by 10 minutes. So if you have a character that's waiting in the training room or on a remote ops, you go into a few battles, and then you've got 30 minutes less on the timer. And they're also, when they finally have gotten the full game as it was, for the most part, besides the fixes, there's seasons of new content planned. New characters and new storylines. So I can probably...
Why did you have to tell me about this? This is my FF14. Spent too many hours in this.
That's a really cool thing I've been helping out with when I can. And on that note, there's also, I just found out about, well, this actually just started a couple weeks ago, it seems. Marvel Heroes, which is, I think, my favorite game of all time. But for the last year that it was around, or for a year, I played it for about, or I wanted to play it for about 3 years, but the year in between, my computer just absolutely refused to run it for seemingly no reason, and I actually had to just send it in to someone finally after weeks of trying to fix it myself. Something real messed up was wrong with it. And finally I was allowed to play it again, and then they announced that they were shutting it down, and so that's... But I've heard, or I've seen with my own eyes, that there is there's currently a small project going on that is getting what they can of that back online. So far, they can load you into one of the hubs. You can play as any or most of the characters, and a lot of the abilities work. But it is a very small team, and they don't know how far they can. They didn't actually, for years, when I've been trying to find out about this, if this was possible, it seemed no, it was all server side and no one has that information, and so it's completely impossible. But I heard a whisper about it the other day, and surprise, it's not impossible, at least not entirely. They're not sure how far they can go with it yet, but they made a surprise breakthrough, and they're much further along than they ever thought they'd be, basically.
I'll be honest, if they could just get that game running up with just single player, I'll be more than happy
I would be
with that.
Completely fine with that.
I don't think I used the multiplayer aspect of that game at all.
Yeah, I don't think I did either. So that is really exciting.
Yeah, that is neat.
I think that's it for now.
Fun fact, Marvel Heroes was the first game I ever beta tested.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was I was a wee lad.
I heard the beta was bad.
Yeah, that's why I didn't play it afterwards. They also
I
got
played.
they also got rid of character progress. I'm like, well, okay, I don't want to start again.
When I played it, it was amazing.
I'm trying to think. Like I played like Minecraft when it was in beta, but that's different. I feel like than being a beta tester.
Yeah, probably.
And I played Overwatch Free Weekend, which was not quite a beta test, but I think it was kind of a test, and the game was very different than even like a year later. But that's about it, and I didn't give like explicit feedback or anything like that. I tested Pizzerian.
Hey,
Nice.
We love Pizzeria.
All right, John. Blue's giving you some extra minutes, or actually maybe save those extra minutes for me at the end, so that I can do the
outro,
the housekeeping.
That's not gonna happen.
Do you?
Okay, so before I get to the video games I've been playing, one thing I want to talk about is this totally real. You can't convince me otherwise. Final Switch 2 reports by VGC.
They're real this time.
It is real this time because multiple studios have confirmed they actually have dev kits. So,
I'm going to believe you, but I'm still going to point out how it sounds.
It's a Switch 2, not the Switch Pro. The Switch Pro was all fake from the begin with. This is just the next-gen system that was
people
inevitable.
People have been like, oh, the next Switch console, the sequel is gonna come out soon. They did it with mostly the Pro, but also, like, the follow-up.
Yeah,
they've been like,
it's
totally real.
The Pro was what people, like, actually hooked on to because people started doing this rumor, like, very soon after the Switch was out, like, only, like, a couple years. And so even though people were saying, oh, it's the Switch Pro, it's the Switch 2, at that time, the Switch Pro was the thing that would make the most sense if they were actually going to do something within the year. And now we've moved into, now Switch 2 makes the most sense of what they would do if they made a new Switch. But there's a certain aspect, like, I'm not saying that it's not wrong, but, like, or that it's not right, but it's just that there's people out there who just say, oh, the next Switch is coming out, and they've just been saying it for, like, the past 5 years. And, like, yeah, eventually they're gonna be right.
Yeah, now there's, like, actual reports. So this is probably the only, like, confirmed thing that we've ever gotten from it.
But it's a bit of a boy who cried wolf situation.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Where we're willing to let the boy get eaten by the wolf, which is to say we're willing to not get hyped about the Switch 2 even if it's actually coming out, I think is where people are at.
And to be fair, for a quick second, it's like Nintendo, like any company right now, like I'm sure like PlayStation's still right now, like in like very early on like PlayStation 6 or something like that, whatever the successor is going to be, because that's just how these companies work. So yeah, there have been Switch 2 or like Switch Pro rumors for a while, but I will say that any Switch rumor that has been confirmed to be like, or that has said like, oh, the next Switch is going to have 4K display, that's like, you are lying through your teeth. There's no way, there's no realistic way they would do that or anything like that. It's like, oh. But this one is just like, VGC reports like multiple companies have dev kits they're planning and to be expected release next year. That I'm not too sure about. It's just the release date, because people will be like, oh yeah, they're just like throwing dates out there right now because like that.
Yeah, like Christmas 2024, like that's sort of all I could see.
Yeah, plus,
like if it was next year, it's late next year.
Yeah, plus, well, to be honest, Nintendo's like system launches have all been like on the same like day or like relative time area, which is like late November.
Yeah.
Except for the Switch,
early March. The Switch, they did early March, so it would be like they may try to do that again. But part of that was, I think this was a good strategy of saying like, hey, we don't want the Switch to sell out so quickly, so we'll release it kind of far away, let all the hardcore folks get in on it quickly, and then they won't be fighting with all the people who are just getting a Switch for Christmas. And I think like that's worked out, because like the Wii, I remember especially,
no one could get
that. Was like, we wanted one like as a family, and we had to wait like a year before we could get it, just because. And part of that was because we were younger, so it was kind of up to the parents who weren't necessarily like plugged into everything. But I think they want to avoid that. So it would just sort of depend on what they assume is going to happen to the market. I do know you mentioned that they had like their annual review.
Yeah.
And it looks like Switch sales are declining, but like just they're back to
Mario
like
Kart
the first
isn't.
year of the Switch.
Yeah.
Like they sold about as many in 2022 as they sold in like 2017.
Mario Kart is still steady though.
Mario Kart is still selling the same amount
It makes no
every
sense.
year.
People are making
Literally since the beginning.
People are making
Like-
new Switch accounts just so they can buy Mario Kart again.
It is. I don't understand. Like at some point, I need to run the numbers and see like what percentage of Switch owners own Mario Kart 8? Because it's got to be crazy. at this
I want to know how
Percentage
many
of the human population has a.
I want to know what percentage of those sales are physical.
Yeah.
I would be.
Yeah.
Curious.
I don't think you can see that, but that would be an interesting question.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be like the go-to game, right? Like it's just like.
Oh yeah, no, that's the no-brainer game. It's like you pick up a Switch. What do you get? Oh, how about this one that everybody likes and talks about?
This is the multiplayer Mario game. Well, you know, Super Smash Brothers and other games might have something to say about that. As Scott
So what
would say.
do we know? Are these rumors that are the aspects of them that are kind of substantiated? Is there anything about them that like says what the Switch 2 is going to be like? Aside from the fact that I think I have seen this, like it is going to be like going to keep you can put it in a rectangle and put it on your TV, or you can hold it in your hands.
The only thing we know for sure is that it will launch with an LCD screen instead of an OLED screen, which is probably just being done for cost because like
For cost, yeah.
the OLED screen, while it's nice, it's not necessary in the slightest.
Yeah, and I bet the extra cost it incurs is not valuable to the actual customer base,
Yeah.
right? Like, there's definitely people who are like, oh yeah, I love the crispness of the OLED, but I think for most people who are like playing in handheld mode, that's not like it would be nice, but it's not like, you know, $100 nice,
Yeah.
or even like $50 nice.
Plus,
like,
to be honest, the only time I ever play my Switch in handheld mode is when I take it on trips. It's like for most of the time I'm playing on it, it's docked to a monitor or my TV.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
yeah, that used to be me. I do it handheld now just because I'm floating around more, and when I lived in London, the TV just was not set up for it.
Mhm.
There was a TV mounted way up on a wall, and there was nowhere to put the dock. But whatever my next situation will be, I will probably try to get something a little more concrete.
Yeah, the only other detail is that it'll have 32 gigs of internal memory, which, yeah,
Which is a lot, actually. How much? Because doesn't the current Switch only have like 8?
No, it has 16.
Because it's probably shared. It's shared video and system RAM, I bet.
Yeah, but then they'll probably have a micro SD card slot so you can put in whatever terabyte of micro SD you have.
Right, but that 30 of storage. I was thinking, for some reason I was thinking RAM, and I was like, wait a minute.
No.
32 gigs of RAM.
No, storage.
I was like, what? We were just talking about keeping costs down. Why are we going to 32 gigabytes of RAM?
I have downloaded all of the RAM on the internet.
Yes.
Tears of the Kingdom in 120 frames per second, baby. Let's go.
Which RAM helps nothing with.
And also, the screen refresh
That's how
rate
much I know about
probably wouldn't be
technology.
able to show it anyway.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean, there's speculation that it's going to use basically the successor to the same sort of processor that the current Switch uses. Which, I mean, again, I don't think any of the current reports that are like relatively believable have actually confirmed that or not. I don't recall.
I do. I remember reading in an interview that like they said it'll have a different gimmick, basically, or a new gimmick.
What does that mean, though?
I don't. You never know with Nintendo.
It'll have a new hook. They have a
I don't
idea.
think anyone, or maybe they did. I don't remember. I guess, but did anyone, when they were like, okay, so after the Wii U, there's gonna be this thing that acts as a console and a handheld at the same time. Was that, like,
Console.
a common...
No, that was the first.
I don't think so.
I think that was, like, a pretty big innovation that no one really saw coming in any meaningful way.
I bet you could go
I
back
bet
far enough in the GameCola podcast
Yeah.
and see what we were talking about.
Yeah, you were talking
whenever it
about
was first being
the
rumored.
Next or NX or
Yeah.
whatever it
Yeah,
was.
I don't know how much had been revealed about it on the one. Because
Yeah.
there's definitely the NX was what it was the code
Yeah,
name.
I
And we have
remember hearing
think it's
you
like-
guys
I
talk
remember
about that.
I listened to that
I-
podcast recently, but I've kind of forgotten. I've just been listening to a bunch of older GameCola episodes, and I've kind of forgotten a lot about what I heard. But I was like, I definitely remember that a lot of the predictions were totally off base. I definitely remember
it's
that the
good
majority
history.
of what was said turned out to be wrong. I remember people like saying, "Oh, I really don't think I'm gonna like this," or "I don't know if this is gonna do well," or like, "I don't." There were some predictions, like either personal predictions about what games people would like or whether things would be good or not.
I don't
that
know,
were
Mr.
way
Edison. This
off.
light bulb thing doesn't seem to catch on.
Yeah.
Back in my day, this stuff was predictable. Yeah, no, that's the only two confirmed things. We also just don't know if it'll be backwards compatible or whatnot. I think it could go either way. No, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it is, and I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't.
Yeah, I almost wonder if like it wouldn't actually be like because I don't if they're using like similar hardware and just like going up a generation but using the same basic hardware infrastructure. I feel like that would probably lend itself to not
Yeah.
having to put much effort into making it
Yeah.
backwards compatible. But then also if you have a lot of digital games, right?
Mhm.
Like I don't know how that affects the whole backwards compatible angle. Right? Like, there's a certain point, it's like, most people are buying their games digitally, so if we just say, yeah, if you have a physical cartridge, you can put it in the new thing. But then, I don't know, then that would,
Well,
long term,
I
that would
mean-
probably encourage more people to buy the hardware, the physical versions, and I think they make more money on the digital versions. So I think they would prefer, if they are going to say, like, oh, you can keep your previous Switch library into this new Switch, they would want to make the digital library somehow also go over, though they probably wouldn't like you would probably have to have a different Nintendo Switch Online. I don't know, there's a lot of different angles they
Yeah.
could take on it,
It would
and
be-
there's a lot they wouldn't necessarily stick to the ones that would be popular.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I will say that like that would be about the stupidest possible move would be making physical Switch games compatible and like doing something weird with the digital like
Yeah. If anything, I
that-
feel like
that
they would
would
do the
be-
reverse.
yeah, I was like like I could see them. Well, I'm thinking more of like a 3DS kind of situation where like you can plug in DS games and like they work, but then there's something about Switch 2 games that like they don't physically fit, or it's like it's not compatible.
They
But
put
but
a notch
also-
on these.
yeah, exactly, maybe. But like if they're going to allow backwards compatibility with physical games, it would be asinine to not do the same kind of convenient, like to not do that for digital games. I don't know if that's what you were implying, or if it would be a different procedure. I can't imagine why it would be a different procedure for digital versus physical backwards compatibility, I guess.
Well, I mean, like, when I think about it, I think about the angle of, when your system is backwards compatible, then you don't have to re-buy the game.
Right.
So I'm not saying, like, you would not be able to download Breath of the Wild onto Switch 2. I'm saying, can you play Breath of the Wild on your Switch 2 because you bought it for the Switch 1, and would it matter if you had it physically or digitally? And the thing is like, because Nintendo is so strongly based on its first party titles in a way that I feel like other companies aren't quite as much, though I do think especially with Microsoft's acquisition sprees, that may be changing kind of too. It's just more of a subsidiary relationship than the sort of straightforward first party in-house at Nintendo.
Mhm.
But like, if you've got a platform that has a lot of third party titles, making all of those third-party titles work on your new console is just a bonus to get people to buy your new console because it comes with a bunch of games, and you weren't going to make any more money from those games, or maybe not as much. I don't know how the actual deals work, but I feel like that's different when it's like Nintendo's like, people may just buy Mario Kart 8 again. They like it that much, so maybe we shouldn't let them be able to play it because they'll probably just buy it again. And so, like, not use your old copy, whether it's physical or digital. Again, I don't know, but then like, I don't know. You could just get a bunch of people who then say, well, then why would I buy a Switch 2 if it's just a fancier Switch? I did not think at all about even considering getting the OLED Switch, for example.
Yeah, I never considered getting that.
And I think you would, without enough features like backwards compatibility, you would get a lot of people who say like, sure, then if someone gets a Switch who never had one, they would get the new one. But people with an old one would not necessarily move forward. And I think that's the angle you would have to worry about, especially if you're even if you're trying to put in some new gimmick that we can't think of. If you're still using the same underlying physical, the underlying, you can put it in the TV or you can do it handheld, then you're going to need to differentiate it some way, and the backwards compatibility could go a long way.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing to consider is also, like, are they going to continue selling the original Switch? Because that's another thing. The price standpoint. Like, the thing you have to wonder is, are they going to stop selling the original Switch before this console comes on sale, or are they going to discount the original Switch and then sell the new console at some particular price, maybe the price of what the Switch used to be? Or are they keeping the Switch's price where it is, and then the Switch 2 is going to be more expensive? Because, I mean, if they're going to keep selling the Switch one way or another, especially if there is no backwards compatibility for some particular reason, if they decide to go that route, then presumably they would keep selling the Switch for a while. So beyond that, there would need to be some kind of value proposition, either in price or in functionality.
There would also be a pretty big resale market.
Yeah.
Too, because a lot of people be like, well, if I'm getting a Switch 2, I don't need my original Switch.
John,
you got a couple minutes. Get your games that you've been playing in recent times.
Okay, I 100% at MegaMan.exe. That was super fun. Hadouken. What else? I'm also currently playing Final Fantasy VII. I think I'm a little more than halfway through it. I don't know. It's hard to tell with these games. And then I just looked up. There's a whole bunch of side content I missed. I'm like, oh, I hate it when that happens. But and then I think I'm also like replaying Spider-Man Web of Shadows because that game is just a dopamine rush for me at this point.
Which version?
I'm on the Xbox version. I also have the PC version too, physically.
Is that one of the ones that's a Metroidvania, or is that
no? That's the PS2 and DS ones.
That's the one I played, and I had no idea that the other ones were completely different until recently. I was like, oh, I have to find a way to play this.
Yeah, that's what I've been up to. That's what I've been playing, and I love it. I'll go back to Web Shadows any day of the week because my God, that is the web strike mechanic in that game alone is super repetitive. It's not a good game. I will say that. It's gameplay wise, it's like super addicting and super fun, but it's also very repetitive. And there's like a big glitch in every single cutscene that happens. And there's it's a well thought out game. It's just not well polished. I think that's best. Also, the animations on Spidey himself, I'm like, oh my God. It's like the best anime. That's one thing those games have always nailed, is just the animations.
Except when they bug out.
Debatable. But yeah, that's that.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the GameCola podcast. If you like what you heard, be sure to check us out on our actual internet website, GameCola.net, or on our YouTube channel, GC.net, the letter G, the letter C, the word dot, the word net. Follow us, go to the Discord. I'm only giving you one other call to action because I think that's supposed to be better. So go to the Discord. Find it in the Twitter description or in the YouTube description or on the website.
Buried in the woods.
And hang out with us because it's fun. Blue is going to post a thing about Pokemon Infinite Fusion where you can click on a link and say what new fusion you want, I assume.
Yeah, I got a notification that literally said breaking news. So
yeah.
I can do that.
So So you can come to the Discord and you can find that, and you can see all of the fusions that Blue posts pretty frequently, which I do enjoy.
As long as people like it, because I like sharing them, because the artists working on it are very talented and creative.
Oh yeah, they're fantastic. People have entire YouTube shorts.
Yeah, I've got a flood of those, and I'm like, I've been here for years.
Yeah. It's like, you can support an entire YouTube Shorts channel of just being like, look at this cool thing an artist made. Yeah, but there's other stuff you can talk about video games. You can ask us follow-up questions about the podcast. You can help us shape what kind of things we want to talk about on the podcast. You can learn about things like when we do the live stream. We do the awards live stream. You can check that out if you want. But we're running out of the very short time that I've allotted for this podcast. So have a wonderful time of day, wherever it is, whenever it is. You're listening to this podcast. We'll see you next month. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Later.
Do you still have the alarm going off?
No, I think it's over.
Okay.
Which is
I was gonna be like, oh no, we're running out of
time.
Yeah,
no, it's shocking because that fire alarm normally goes on for like 2 hours straight.